Hello everyone, welcome back to the next session of the multimedia systems. In the previous session we were talking about the topic called the speech synthesis, and in the previous session we do recall the things what we have gone through it. The first one is we have generated the concept of speech signals. So in that we have seen about the speech, what is speech, what are different types of speech, and the properties or the characteristics of the speeches. We call this as speech signals. And the second topic we have discussed about the human speech, how humans produce the speech and what are the different components that are associated with the speech. And we have also gone through the different vocal organs or the speech organs that are associated with respect to the production of speech in the human being. Next we have discussed about the speech synthesis, means how do speech can be produced by the mechanical devices. Okay. Next we have also seen how speech can be outputted. Next we have recalled about the concept of reproducible speech synthesis. We have also discussed the two main components, that is sound concatenation over the time range and also sound concatenation over the frequency range. And finally we have discussed about the speech synthesis itself. But today, since we have already gone through the speech synthesis and speech output, today we are about to discuss about the one more topic, that is called the speech input. So, before starting into this concept of speech input, let us discuss with the help of a diagram. So, the first component of the speech input is the speech input itself, where the speech is given as an input parameter, that is raw. Next one is speaker recognition. Next is speech recognition. Now let us look into it, look into the diagram. Now, when we talk about the speech input, the first parameter that we are about to consider is speaker recognition. When we talk about the speaker recognition, we are talking about who is the speaker. Means the person who is talking, we are able to recognize who is that person. How do we do it? This is the first parameter that are associated with the speech input. The first parameter recognizes the speaker, means there are two components with respect to speaker. The first one is a speaker dependent characteristics and speaker independent characteristics. When we talk about the speaker dependent characteristics, there are certain parameters, is physical behavior, physical pronunciation, and also the characteristics of a particular speaker. So through which we are able to recognize this voice is of this particular person. This is called the speaker recognition. You might be knowing initially when the students, you might be finding it very difficult to adopt to a particular teacher. So as the things go on over a period of time, you get acquainted to the particular teachers and his style of teaching and the way of pronunciation, etc. Next, you find it very easy to understand that person, though whatever he is about to try to say it, you will be grasping it very easily. One more best example that can be considered is, you are very familiar with your parents and the relatives, where even though they are not able to say the complete statement, if they are able to say it partially, you will be able to say, recognize and say, oh, you are able to say this one. How is this happening? This is happening because you are able to recognize that speaker, what is the intention and what is he about to say. This is about the who is the speaker. This first part deals with the speaker recognition. The second one is the speech recognition. Here what we deal is, what is the speaker talking. Here the main parameter is the content itself. What is he about to say? There are a lot of parameters that are associated, again, the environmental noise, the physical behavior, emotional behavior of a person, all varies. So if a person is not stable, his pronunciation differs with respect to context. Suppose if I am in a very destructive mood, okay, rather than saying food, I would say food. Means there is a problem with respect to the pronunciation. Then the audience feel what is this person is about to say. So I was intended to say food, F-O-O-D, food, but due to some stress or other activities or in a hurry, or there might be one more problem. I might be turning into the board. My speech of direction is looking towards the board and say food. Means you will be not able to listen to it properly. You would hear the sound instead of food as foof. What do you understand? Then that is the problem. So the next parameter is identifying the speaker's intention of what is he saying. That is called what the speaker is intended to say, the matter itself. And third one is how. There are a lot of other parameters associated into it, and finally we concentrate on how is the speaker speaking. There are various reasons. The best example that can be considered here is the lie detector. How does lie detector play a role? You might be knowing the police or other enquiry person take a victim to a enquiry place and they use a lie detector. What happens? If there is a continuous sequence of verbal speech, then there would be a wave representation in different form. What happens in the lie detector? How do you identify? A person who is about to lie always takes pause. Means he thinks, before answering a question, he needs a small gap of time to think, what should I answer? So all these things are parameters. When we talk about the first one, the speaker recognition itself, there are two parameters again associated. Why do we need to link about? The first is verify the speaker. When we want, how do you verify a speaker? We can verify the speaker provided we have listened his voice, or we have the dictionary where we have stored his sound presence. So only then we will be able to verify who is that speaker. When we are able to verify, what is the second thing? We can identify. When the sound that is produced by a speaker is verified with the vocabularies of speech that is present in the brain or in a data store, we can identify, oh, this sound matches to this sound. So if this is matching to this sound, then this is the person we can identify. This is how the speech recognition happens. This is what we are about to deal with the speech input. Next, we can talk about the speech recognition. The next topic. So when we talk about the speech recognition, the whole process of speech recognition is categorized into three parts. One, the first, it is an interesting field in the multimedia systems. So this plays a very interesting concept where many research is happening in this area. Second one, the primary quality characteristics of each session in the speech recognition is the probability of identifying at least one or less than or equal to one word per session. Means at least you should be able to identify a particular word. Next one, the factors. What are the factors that affects the speech recognition is like an environmental noise, the surrounding noise. Like if there is a vehicle passing up, it makes a sound, that might be added into it, or it might be a bike sound, and it might be a bird sound, or some animals, dogs, cats making up, or cows making up different noise that gets introduced. When all these things gets introduced, again it's a problem to identify the particular speech of a person with respect to a system. Again, the physical and psychological state of a speaker matters. As I already said, the psychological state of a person makes him to pronounce in a different way. One more example I will give you. When I am calm and very cool state, I would be pronouncing it very clearly and very steadily. If I am too hurry, what I say, I start speaking the words very fast, so that the starting would be started with a very high pace or a high pitch. The ending or a landing note will be consumed by me. So in that case, a speaker will not, audience will not be able to hear the complete words. So let us look into the diagram. Here, the first step is speech analysis. What happens in the speech analysis? There are a lot of parameters. For the first step of speech analysis, we provide the input as a speech. A typical input of a speech is fed into the stage. In this first stage, what happens? The first stage is speech analysis, where it associates with lot of parameters of the speech. I analyze the speech. We have studied what are the different parameters like allophones, diaphones, phoneme, the smallest instance or smallest utterance of the sound. All these things are analyzed. The different parameters, the response time, and also the various property has been extracted from the sound. Because when we say about, there might be a particular phoneme also, and there might be just an utterance of the sounds also. So we need to extract what we want. In this stage, that activity is done. That is called speech analysis. In the second stage is called pattern recognition. So after the completion of speech analysis, the control proceeds to the second stage, that is called pattern recognition. What we do in the pattern recognition? In the pattern recognition, we compare with the reference. What is that? When we have extracted a particular sound or a phoneme which is exactly a meaningful statement or a word, we need to compare it with something. When we say compare, we need to have a reference point to compare. So the third stage is a storage. There would be a place called storage, where it consists of lot of references. So human being, with respect to a previous pronunciation, all the reference storage of the speech will be deposited. We can call it as a repository. Creating such a repository is a huge task, because we need to compare with the n number of speech properties. So these reference points are be stored in the storage or the repository. Now what happens when the speech is analyzed? We are doing a pattern recognition or comparing with those references with the exact storage reference. When it is matched, then we get the output as the recognized speech. Then we call that kind of speech is recognized. And I will also wanted to tell you that the poor recognition quality is P of 0.05. That is the average rate of a poor recognition. Next, look into this. Now what we are doing finally in the speech recognition. Speech is said. Speech is analyzed first with respect to various parameters of sound or a speech, like phoneme, allophones, morphones, that is exact meaningful things is extracted. Then it is pushed to the second phase called pattern recognition, where in the pattern recognition, those speech are referred with a reference available. When it is able to make a references, then it would be sent as a recognized speech, because in the speech recognition there might be a lot of distortion. When you call it distortion, the noise might be intruded. These noise might not be intentionally intruded, but unknowingly this might have been introduced into the signal. So we need to eradicate those things and listen or take only the speech, and this is how the speech recognition would happen. Next, while talking about the practicality of this, so we have one more diagram to assess this. Always the theoretical would be so easy, but the practicality varies a bit. Let us look into the practicality aspects. In the practicality aspects, we have one more diagram where we call it as acoustic and phonetic analysis. When we talk about the practicality aspect, practical implementation normally uses dedicated components or a signal processors to extract the characteristics properties of a speech. Now let us look into it in a practical way. The speech is fed into a process called acoustic and phonetic analysis. When we consider phonetic, it is the smallest meaningful statement or a word that is been considered or recognized as a speech is said to be a phonetic analysis. So that phonetic, the acoustic, what is the audible thing and which has a meaningful statement or a word is been analyzed. How it is analyzed? Again, it is analyzed by the various sound pattern that is already present in the repositories. So here the whatever the speech is there, it is fed back into the repository and it is verified whether it is exactly a sound pattern or just a ordinary, just unwanted noise. In the next stage, we concentrate on syntactical. Next phase deals with the syntactical analysis, where we concentrate on syntax of a speech. How the speech is exactly, where in this phase it also corrects the mistakes that has been encountered in the phase 1. We cannot say in the first stage itself we will be able to get a good quality of recognized speech. So the first phase we just look into the phonetical concepts, and second phase we look into the syntactical analysis where the exact syntax of the sound of the speech is being identified. In the third phase, it is semantic analysis. What happens in the last phase? The semantic phase looks into the two phases. If there is any errors in spite of having the first phase, second phase, and still while entering into the phase 3, that is semantic phase, is there any errors? It corrects the errors that has been prevailed in both the phases and finally looks into the very meaningful statements, meaningful things that can be recognized. So it also refers to the various semantics available in the knowledge base, and finally a speech is being recognized. This is how the speech can be recognized. Though again here the lot of parameters would be a problem, as I always discussed in the previous session and also at the beginning of this session, like the environmental parameters. The pronunciation varies from person to person. Is physical pronunciation due to incapabilities of speech pronunciation. The particular word or pronunciation of a word differs from person to person. Its sociality, its lifestyle, because the pronunciation of a word, a particular word, varies from the person who stays in India and the person who stays in the Western countries. So all these parameters varies. And also the external noise that been introduced. So all these parameters are corrected and in the practical way in this process in the 3 phases, and finally we get into the right kind of speech. The next topic is the sound dependent, or the next primary concept we'll look into it is the sound speaker dependent and speaker independent. How do we say a recognized speech is sound speaker dependent? When we say about a speaker dependent, we need to know the speaker priorly. If we hear the voice of a mother or a father or a brother or a sister in spite of many people and in a crowded place, we will be able to recognize, oh, that voice is my mother's, this voice is my brother's, or my sister is speaking. How do we know that? We have made a reference of their voices. In the similar way, the computers would make the speech repositories of a sound dependent speakers with almost of 25,000 words. So with those reference points, we will be able to identify this voice that is been uttered or what we are hearing is of a particular this kind of speaker. So 25,000 words has been made as a key reference point. When we talk about a speaker independent, though when there is less than identification of 1000 words, we go into a concept called speaker independent. Even if we are able to identify 1000 words, we will be able to characterize who is the speaker. But if the characteristics are less than 1000 words, means the vocabularies, look into that, the data dictionary that's been already available, 1000 to 25,000, it's a huge thing. Making that kind of library is very hectic task, but still we have that. If the recognition is done below 1000, then it is very difficult to identify who is the speaker. This is what that deals with the speaker dependent and speaker independent. Next concept. Next concept that we are about to deal with respect to speech synthesis is speech transmission. Now, so far we have discussed about the speech input, speech output part, and also recognition. And when everything is done, even we need to transmit that speech. How to transmit from one place to another, or where do we transmit? The primary intention of this topic of speech transmission is, it's a field, very interesting field, which deals with or relating with high efficient encoding of speech signals to enable low data rate data transmission with minimal or negligible quality of loss. In simple, if you wanted to say, we wanted to transfer a high quality data, okay, very high quality of sound signal or a speech signal with less bandwidth or less frequency with minimum loss is said to be the intention of speech transmission. So I would like to recall the concept of the sound concept here. So before representing the sound or transmission of the sound needs to be digitized. Only when we are able to digitize the pressure wave of the sound into digitization, then we can store and transmit. In the similar way, the speech signals are also in a pressure waves forms. So it has to be digitized. So how do we digitize? The same process what we have already gone through is the pulse code modulation, the PCM concept. So using the PCM concept, we will be able to identify the various different samples. So when we are able to assess various samples, what we have already seen like this. I am just considering a half wave, not a complete full wave. When we consider like this, it is said to be a full wave. But now I am considering only half wave just for the illustration. So each thing is said to be a different sample. So these samples are digitized. When we are able to digitize, then we can store it on a computer or a system. When we are able to store, we can transmit it. So pulse code modulation helps us to digitize this. The one of the illustration that can be considered is the PCM with respect to CD. PCM with respect to CD uses the rate. The sampling rate is as follows: 2 into 44,100 divided by the number of seconds that is being prevailed into 16 bits divided by 8 bit per bytes. That is equal to almost 1,76,000 bits per second. This is the sampling rate that is being achieved with respect to the pulse code modulation with respect to CD quality of speech or audio. Now imagine what is the amount of sampling rate that's been used. Next, even I'd like to illustrate the example of a telephone. Telephone almost uses 64,000 kilobits of data for transmission. Next is a source encoding. Let us look into the concept of source encoding with respect to a diagram. what happens in the source encoding? The first stage in the source encoding is the analog signal, that is a speech signal, is fed into AC-DC converter, that is analog to digital converter, where the speech is analyzed, where speech analysis takes place. Then it is coded with respect to separate speech signals. What happens? What is that coding happens here? Because when we talk about I'll continue with the diagram, I'll go with a step-by-step explanation. In the source encoding, it is an alternative method of a PCM. It is not that only source encoding has to be done or the PCM has to be done or the combination of both. Any one of the concept can be used for the better transmission. It depends upon the individuality of or the purpose of the usage. So it is an alternative method of a PCM where some of the transmission characteristics are very much dependent with respect to original things. When we want the original characteristics of a speech signal without any tampering, if we want it as it is, then the concept of source encoding comes into picture. How do we handle the original thing without the tampering? I'll tell you one example where when we talk into the speech, there would be a concept of pauses from word to word or from a statement to a statement. There would be pauses when we need to compress, or the pauses where there is no speech signal can be reduced. Already it is a pause since there is no utterance of sound. Even if we reduce it completely, then we can reduce the size of the speech, but without tampering or harming the quality of the sound. This concept is being used in the source encoding, where only the signals of the speech where our person is uttering is not at all harmed or not at all tampered. We look into the spaces where there is blanks or the silence, only those things are compressed. So the originality is enhanced and the size is been decreased. Now then after this stage, again here we do a reconstruction, because here the concept what I said, the concentration or reducing of the size happens, and finally again we feed into digital to analog converter, and then we hear the speech and this can be transmitted. So this is the concept of source encoding. Now after looking into all these things, we have completely understood the various components of speech synthesis. So these are the concepts that I had wished to discuss with you with respect to first module. By this, all these concepts, we have come to the end of the module 1. Thank you. Thanks for your patient listening.